Okay, the 62 VW bus just got a 300 horsepower Subaru turbo intercooled motor. Just finished it today. So here's the first peek look. Water bucket over here, water bucket, air filter, intercooler up on top. Guess what, guys? I just finished this 300 horsepower Subaru turbo intercooled engine install yesterday. I just took it for a test drive this morning. Everything looks good. So here is the full YouTube video on the install. What we have here is it's probably like a 94 300 horsepower turbo Subaru motor. What I did is, main thing is, you know, my VW engine only had like 50 horsepower, so this will hopefully get me out in the mountains. What I did is I put the water coolant bucket over here with a custom mounting bracket. I did take out the gas tank, which is normally back here, but because this is no longer a cool area, this is actually, with the VW, this is cool and it's hot under here and it has a gasket, so this is most particularly a cold area. But now with the Subaru motor, it's actually a hot area. So it's a good idea to move that gas tank and put it somewhere else. So I have the intercooler here, and the battery and computers and the wiring harness tucked in over here for now. I still have a little bit of wiring to do, but overall everything is hooked up. On the fuel tank, some of the things that I had to do, you do need to install a fuel return line in the gas tank because now we're running fuel injection. Okay, so today I'm making jewelry for half a day and then I'm working on the Subaru install today. I already did 1 inch. I took 1 inch off of each side, which will give me room for my valve covers, so if I ever wanted to remove them, I could. And I didn't cut it, I actually just bent it down. And then project 2 is to add a fuel return line to my fuel tank because it's a fuel injected motor and you have to have that fuel return line. I've seen people put like a T in, but then all you're doing is asking for trouble because air will get in. So I'm pulling the tank now. And that's my goal today, is to get this in, and I might even get the motor in today. So here's the trick to putting on a fuel return line on your tank. I just used, these are just leftover fittings from doing like your oil pressure gauge and your, temperature sending units and all that. You get one of those, and then you just get a 5/16 nipple, and then find the nut that goes on the threads, and there you go. Couple bucks, and you got a fuel return line. You don't need any special fancy kit. I did have to cut. I cut 1 inch off of each side, and a little bit off of about 1 inch on this front back piece here. So a little bit of trim on the tin. It's not necessary. I don't necessarily had to cut it. I just cut it just so I can, if I do need to work on the motor, I can get the valve covers off. Yes, I can get to the spark plugs very easily. The spark plugs are actually slightly below, underneath the tin level, so I can get the spark plugs out and the coil packs. I have quite a bit of clearance here. I can easily work on this. I have seen people put in like a hatch up here, from up here, like the Vanagons have. I don't really think it's necessary. Because I did take the fuel tank out, I've got all kinds of room back here. I don't need a throttle body reverser. I didn't need that because I don't have any clearance issues in the 62 VW engine bay. The next thing is, of course, cooling. I have my temperature gun here, and I've been watching it pretty profusely just to make sure that it is running cold and at the temperatures it's supposed to. Subarus have a 170 degree thermostat. What I did do, several options on the radiator. I do have like a Dodge truck radiator, which is a little bit bigger, but it was like 4 inches worth of radiator, super thick, and then 2 inches worth of, fan. So I think I measured it, it was like 6.5 inches tall. And because my frame is only 4 inches, it would have hung down a good 2.5 to 3 inches below my frame. And you can see I'm pretty low as it is. So I didn't want to rip my radiator off the car. So I put the radiator, so the other option is, I did a lot of research on radiators. I looked at, let me see, about 60 pages, 10 radiators per page. It was like 600 different radiators that I looked at. I was up all night looking for a good radiator for my space. What I did is I went with a Acura NSX. I went with an NXX radiator, mainly because it was a 2-row, all aluminum race radiator with the electric fans, and it had 45 degree angle inlet and outlets. So when I was mounting it underneath, because they're at a 45 degree angle, it gives me a better clearance. Had they have come straight off, my radiator hose would have came straight off, and it would have been lower to the ground. So I went with the NSX radiator. The other option, if you are thinking of radiators, I know that a lot of people are putting side radiators. They're putting the Honda Civic radiator here and another Honda Civic radiator right here with dual fans and everything. That really didn't interest me at all to do that. Number one is it blocks off. I wouldn't be able to get to my battery, and I do intend to put a house battery here for the camper van. And had there been a radiator here, I wouldn't be able to. I'd lose all kind of engine room, and I wouldn't have access to anything around here. It would just, and there would be so much heat in this engine bay with all that radiator stuff. It just wasn't a good option for me. Another option that I found is some people are putting a radiator right here in the front. And then, of course, they cut louvers in the doors or some kind of an air thing. If you want to do that, the best radiator I found to fit almost perfectly in this space is the Jeep Cherokee. The Jeep Cherokee will fit right here, and it has 3 radiator fans on it. And then what you can do is just like motorhomes, the big diesel pusher motorhomes that have radiators in the rear, what they do is they have a hinge, so you can open it up. And then you can close the radiator, so you do have access to the engine. I just didn't do that right away. It's an option, maybe, but I kind of And that way the radiator would be off the ground. It'd be a lot less hoses to run. I just didn't want to cut up my door. This is kind of like a sleeper car. So that is a good option for those that want to put a radiator. I would put it right here. I wouldn't go with the two sides. If I was going to do a radiator back here, I'd do the Jeep Cherokee right here on a swing door kind of a thing. As far as the radiator hoses, I manufactured some aluminum, 1.5 inches. All of the inlets and outlets are 1.5 inches hose. I ran about 5 feet of aluminum hose on the top, and what I did is I kept this radiator hose and kept it high, and then down to the floor, to the radiator. I kept this high, and then when I ran the lower hose, I kept that hose low and ran that nice and low. That way, less likely to, trap air, better circulation, better when you are adding water to it. It just probably helps with the bleeding of the system, because sometimes these Subarus can be hard to bleed. So if you want to get into it, why go with a Subaru motor? Why not just do an air-cooled, high horsepower VW motor? Well, a lot of it has to do with, in my research, was the financial, the money part. To get even a realistic, even 120 horsepower VW motor that's all built out, they were about $6,000 for a regular motor. If I wanted like a fuel injected VW motor that maybe was, maybe 160 horsepower, those are like about $8,500 to $9,000 for a performance street, VW motor. And the thing is my VW motor always ran hot. So horsepower to heat is an equation. The more horsepower, the more heat. So if I can't keep my 65 horsepower VW motor cool, how am I going to keep a 120 horsepower motor cool? Now, if I wanted like a really high horsepower VW motor, like with a turbo and fuel injection, those motors are about $12,000. Which is way out of my price range. And then if it ever broke, what am I going to do? I have to buy another $12,000 motor. So that's why I went with the Subaru. I can get a Subaru turbo motor all day long for $1,200. All day long, $1,200 for a Subaru turbo. And this is a 4 cam. If I just wanted, the regular cam, single cams, Subaru motors, you can get those for like $950 from those Japanese import companies in California that import them with like 30,000 miles. So if this motor ever went, $1,200, I can replace it. If I put in a high horsepower VW motor, $12,000 to replace it. So, and because I'm building this to drive around the world, up to Alaska, down to Mexico, across Canada, I wanted a motor that I could work on, that wouldn't break down all the time. So hopefully this will be that motor. I didn't intentionally want to go with a turbo motor. It just happened to be for sale, and I saw it for sale. Some of the things, let's go over what you have to do to put in a Subaru motor. Number one, as far as cutting it, I did like a 1-inch cut on this side, a little bit on the front, and 1 inch on each side. So as far as fitting it was really easy. In fact, I pulled the VW motor and had this motor in the car in the same day. It was that easy. What I have is I have a Kennedy transmission adapter plate and flywheel kit. Those are about $500 from Kennedy Engineering. I also have the lowered chopped off oil pan. Because the Subaru pans are a little bit lower, I think these are like a couple inches shorter. They're cut and then welded. I also have a custom exhaust that I welded up. I have like a 12-inch MagnaFlow baffle exhaust that I welded on there, which makes it sound super boss. I actually kind of like it. And then I custom made a engine motor mount. Now they make motor mounts as part of a kit. They're not that expensive. They're like $250, everybody I talked to said if you do go with that, you pretty much have to modify them anyways, because it depends on your car and where you're going to run the exhaust and stuff like that. I had to custom make mine so that it fit with my exhaust and my shell. It really didn't take me that long to make the motor mount system. I have some aftermarket motor mounts that I got that are performance, because this engine didn't come with the motor mount, so I bought some. So anyways, that's why I did the engine swap. It's mostly for liability, fuel injection, economy, and horsepower. Now in Florida, when I was driving this car around, it seemed fine with the regular engine. I mean, and so I said, hey, let's go out west to the West Coast. Well, Florida's flat. And so the car ran fine on flat ground. It never really overheated. It ran a little bit hot here in Florida, maybe around on a morning it would run like 180. In the afternoon it was running at 195. But when I got to like Moab, Arches, Utah, Grand Canyon, Nevada, and Arizona areas like Vegas, where it was 106 degrees, I couldn't even run my VW motor. It was just hot. In like 20 minutes it'd be over like 220 degrees in 20 minutes. I have to pull over constantly. So clearly that was when I made the decision that I wasn't going to stick with VW motor. I was going to put in a Subaru motor. So a question I get all the time is, how much did it cost to do the Subaru change? Like I said, you can get these Subaru turbo motors for about $1,250 with the turbo. And they come with a computer. If you get the regular single cam Subaru motors, they're about $950 with 30,000 miles on them from these Japanese imports. They do not come with a computer. So if you have to buy the computer, it's like $1,250 for the computer and the wiring harness. This engine is running an aftermarket racing programmable computer made by Lynx, which is a New Zealand company. That way it's completely programmable. You can tell it which sensors you're going to run, which ones you're not going to run, things like that. Another thing you will need to change is the oil pan, the shortened oil pan. Some people pay for that. You will need the Kennedy adapter plate and clutch kit, which is like 500 bucks. The engine motor mount bar, I've seen those like 250 bucks. Some people buy a custom muffler system, you know, those can be rather expensive. I can't remember. It might be $400 or $500 for the exhaust kit. They might even be a lot more, I don't know. I just made mine. Mine has a 12-inch MagnaFlow. I just welded it up as is. I made my own plumbing and piping. I basically had this in about a week. But then I spent another couple weeks, you know, waiting for parts and just kind of tuning it and playing around with it. So all in all, I have about 3 weeks, but I could have had it basically running in a week, easy. In a campground. I'm technically in a campground. And I did this whole thing outside at my camp spot here at this Florida campground. So is it difficult? I don't know, man. I did this in a campground. So let's see, I spent about $300 on radiator hoses. My radiator was about, you know, for my NSX radiator was about $260. So that's about it. I say overall, I think I have about maybe $3,500 for the Subaru swap. And compared to doing a fuel-injected turbo VW motor, which would have cost me $12,500, $3,500 for this is a sweet, sweet deal. Okay guys, so how much does a Subaru engine swap actually cost? I did mine myself here in this campground, but I've seen pricing online starting at about $12,000 for labor. I saw another company charging $17,500 for an engine swap. And I've seen I saw another one online which was $23,500, which included the engine. And I've seen them all the way up to $30,000 for a engine swap. But I decided to do mine myself.